Most entrepreneurs focus on growing a business, but very few focus on building one worth selling. And that's truly the difference between being rich and being wealthy. So what makes a business truly worth selling? Well, one that's truly worth buying. And we say that in jest, but if you think about it, what are business buyers looking for in a company that they're going to invest their life savings in, or equity groups that have investors to answer to? What are they going to invest their money in? One is something with predictable revenue streams. Buying groups are attracted to businesses with consistent and predictable income. Why is that? Because the longer a company has been in business and the more they could see over a period or a longer period of time how profitable the company was, the more surety they have and the more confidence and comfort level they have in going to their investors and saying, this is a company worth buying. But that also means if it's a company worth buying, that it's a company that's maybe worth more money, a higher multiple. We're going to talk a lot about multiple drivers. If your industry sells for a 5x to a 7x EBITDA multiple, what makes it a 5? What makes it a 7? So the things we talk about today are going to be value drivers. The next value driver are clean financials. What is the state of your financial records? Are they iffy at best? Are you trying to show as small of a profit as possible so you pay as little of tax as you possibly can? And this is a conversation I have with business owners every day. You sit there and you try to shrink that bottom line as much as you can so you could save 25, 30, 35 cents on the dollar. Okay, so you feel pretty good. Well, I didn't put $500,000 on the income statement or my tax returns, so I saved $100,000 in taxes. Well, what I would tell you is if you left off, $500,000 in net income, what you did, if your company sells for 3 times that, you've cost yourself $1.5 million. If your company sells for 5 times that, you cost yourself $2.5 million. So to save $100,000, you cost yourself millions. So clean financials are important because a buyer, especially financial groups or banking institutions, they're going to look at the cleanliness of your financials, which tells them a couple of things. One, you run a business that's worth buying. They could get with a surety that, hey, the information we're looking at is accurate, and they can depend on that when they, again, go to their investors and they're putting together an offer and they see that you have a predictable revenue stream with clean financials. They're willing to push that multiple a little further than if it wasn't, because everything they find that's wrong with the business, they take that multiple down lower, and it's hard to defend a higher price point. Owner independence. The business should operate smoothly without the owner's constant involvement. That's one of the biggest differences between a Main Street business transaction and lower middle market transaction with an M&A advisor. For the first part of my career, I was a Main Street business broker. And I think Main Street business brokerage is great and vital. So if you have a company that's doing $1 million a year or less in revenues, you should. Main Street business brokers can do a wonderful job and can help you sell your company. But when we start talking about companies in the lower middle market or mergers and acquisitions, and we're talking about what's going to drive a high value, those are the kind of businesses where we're talking about owner independence. The business owner should not be the person that comes in every day and is one day changing the light bulb and the next day out on the van, or they're out with the crew every single day. They need to be running the business, not letting the business run them. So you want to make sure that you, as the business owner, that you have a great team. Buyers buy businesses for many different reasons. One is income stream. We've talked about that. Anyone tells you that money doesn't matter, they're lying. The second reason they're going to buy it is possibly for your name, your reputation, the company itself, the industry. The industry is very important, and your team. So putting a strong team in place, that people that hold certain functions of a company that allows you to be able to scale, is going to be very important. Again, that's going to be a value driver for your company. So owner independence, extremely important. That business should be able to run whether you're there today or you're not there today. It shouldn't be dependent on you every second of the day. Another value driver is strong EBITDA. This is a word that's going to be pronounced wrong or differently because there's really no way to pronounce it. EBITDA just stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. You'll see people say EBITDA, some people say EBITDA, some people say EBITDA. That's what it means. It's your earnings before your interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And a healthy EBITDA is going to drive a healthy value or outcome for the sale of your company. But it indicates profitability. How strong is your company? How do you perform? How much money are you making? And what is your operational efficiency? So we want to make sure your company has strong EBITDA margins that show the true power of your company, the earning power of your company. You want to make sure that you have competitive moats in place. What does that mean? what's your competitive advantage? What protects your company? What gives you the ability to continue growing strong EBITDA margins and be able to run as profitable as you can? What differentiates yourself from your competition? Because if you think about it, if you're in the roofing business or you're in the HVAC business and all you're doing is going out there and you're doing the same job as everybody else, the same way they're doing it. Only thing at that point, if the customer, the end user, looks at you and says, oh, they're all going to do the same thing, who are they going to hire? They're going to hire the company that's the cheapest, right? So you want to make sure that you have competitive advantages in place that sets you aside or apart from your competition. Because if you do not differentiate yourself from your competition, all you're going to compete on is price. And when you compete on price, nobody wins. So you want to make sure you avoid the pitfall of getting every job at any price at all costs, because sometimes a lower revenue with a higher profit margin is better than a higher revenue with a lower profit margin or with very, very slim profit margins. One of the value drivers in a company is your company itself. What makes you unique? What makes you stand out above your competition? So your competitive advantages, right? So we talk about my company is the biggest, the best. Those are talking points. Everybody says that. We're the biggest, we're the best, or we're the cheapest, we're the best value. But at the end of the day, if you're in a business that's competitive and someone going out and getting 2 or 3 or 4 different quotes, and at the end of that process, they're looking at all 3 or 4 companies, including yours, and they're saying, all these guys do the same thing. Who are they going to hire? And they're going to hire the company that was the cheapest. So at that point, you're just competing on price. So one of the biggest value drivers you can add for your company is differentiating yourself from your competition. So you have to focus on what sets you aside, what makes you better, what makes you unique, what do you do different than your competition? And if everyone in the industry does the same, what makes you better at doing what everybody does? So now when they're looking at the 3 or 4 bids, yours stands so far head and shoulders above the others that now they're looking at, we don't necessarily want to hire the cheapest company, we want to hire the best company. And even if it costs a little more, we feel so strong that based on the presentation and based on what was presented to us, that your company stands so far ahead of the others that they're going to hire you. So that's a value driver. What makes you unique or what makes you different? And you have to differentiate yourself from your competition, because if you don't, you're going to compete on price. And when you compete on price, nobody wins. So now let's talk about how to enhance your business's value. Because if we can enhance the value and make it more attractive in the marketplace, then when people are looking or bidding to buy your company, they're willing to offer more. So how do we enhance the value of your business? One, you have to look at improving your customer lifetime value. You have to focus on retaining customers and increasing their spending over time. Now, you might be in an industry where it's one and done, but even with an industry like that, how do you improve the customer lifetime value? Well, it could just be that you do such a great job that even if it was a roof that has a 20-year life expectancy, so they may not need you again for a while, their neighbors, you made such an impact that their neighbors may want to use you, or their friends, so they're going to refer you. So now you're building off of that customer relationship that you could enhance your business, that they're happy to say, hey, this is the company that did my job and they did such a wonderful job. But even if there is a product or service that you're providing that has a long lifespan, it doesn't mean along the way that another storm doesn't come through or something goes wrong or there's not service that has to be done. You want them to remember you, and you want them to be able to go back and say, that's the company we need to hire. So again, you want to have a customer for life. You want to have a customer that keeps coming back to you. And how do you do that? One, you got to stay in front of them. They have to know you're still around and still in business, but you have to make that lasting impact. And that starts from the very first phone call to the goodbye to the how do I keep in touch with them? Am I email marketing them? Am I staying in front of them some way for them when they need my service again, they're going to remember to call me. We have to reduce our customer acquisition cost, right? Well, how do we do that? So you optimize your marketing strategies to acquire customers more efficiently, right? Easier said than done. That's what everyone is striving to do. When you're first in business and you're first starting out, it's going to cost a lot more because you're starting from scratch. But right now, we're not talking to business owners like that. We're talking to established companies that have built a brand and are looking to maybe one day go to market. But it's never too late to start. You still have to look at your, customer acquisition costs. Where are we spending our money? Are you monitoring that? Do you know what's working and what's not working. So, and when you decide what's working and what's not working, then you could adjust along the way. Because if you understand that this marketing campaign is 3 times more effective than this marketing campaign, maybe you need to stop investing in the marketing campaign that's not doing as well and invest twice as much in the one that's getting you a 3 times greater outcome, because now all of a sudden you're placing your money in an area where it's become more efficient for you and you're going to generate more revenue. Optimize your customer acquisition cost by becoming more efficient, by understanding what is the best way to reach my customer. And again, the more you're in business, the better you should become at this, because I often say 26 years in selling businesses, my phone rings just because. The trusted advisor, financial advisor, the business attorney, the CPA has a client that's looking to exit their company. So they say, hey, call Crest. So my phone just rings. But year 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in the business, that didn't happen. So I was taking time to build those relationships. But today, and along with your business, if you're not building those relationships, you're costing yourself money, because what you're doing is you're making it more expensive to acquire a customer. And by doing that, you're always hunting. You're always hunting and trying to get that person to call you. Someone made a wise comment one time. They said, earlier in your career, you want to work really hard on your reputation. Then later in your career, your reputation is going to work really hard for you. It sounds so easy, some of the things we talked about, and so simple, but sometimes it's the easy and simple things that drive business. So we want to drive business to our door every single day, reducing the customer acquisition cost. That shows direct to the bottom line. Because if it costs less to acquire a company, that means they're more profitable of a client and you're going to make more money. And in the long run, making more money is going to get you a higher EBITDA, which is going to get you a higher multiple, which is going to get you a higher payday when you exit your company. One of the things we look at are systemized operations. Implementing standard operating procedures to ensure consistency and scalability. Companies your size typically have processes and procedures in place. They have employee manuals and standards and things that everyone understands what they have to do, when they have to do, why they have to do it. Don't get afraid. If you're sitting here and you're watching this and you don't have any of that in place, but you still have a really strong business, these are areas that you can improve on. And when a private equity group or investors are looking to buy your business, they look at some of these things. They don't expect your business to be perfect. So they look for areas where they could improve. And one of the biggest areas that have been proven for most companies are systemized operations. Most companies are working very hard to drive the revenue, to drive the value, to drive the profit, and sometimes the operations, some things will fall through the crack. They have expectations that the employees know what to do and they know how to do it, but think of the time value. If you don't have systems in place and you're a growing company, that means if you're growing, you're hiring more people to come on board. And if every time you hire someone, you don't have a systemized or standard operations or policy manual or procedures in place, you're teaching them new every single time, and you're having to recreate, with videos. And nowadays it's so easy, but with the use of videos, you could have an employee start today and they could watch a series of videos on operations on different segments or areas of your company that brings them up to speed. So it creates an opportunity for these employees to be out in the field a lot quicker. And if they're out in the field a lot quicker, instead of you investing your time and money and resources in them, they're out there bringing revenue to the company, which makes you more profitable. So streamline your operations is extremely important, and it makes you more attractive in the marketplace because, again, a private equity group comes in and they see that you have standard operating procedures in place. Although they may look to improve on them, they say, okay, we don't have to come in and reinvent the wheel. They're doing a really good job at teaching their employees, and they have systems in place that they know from the time you answer the phone the first time it rings to the time you say thank you very much to the customer, we appreciate your business, that things happen in a way that should have happened and that a way that's going to make your company, again, we talked about earlier, stand out above head and shoulders beyond your competition because you have a systematic approach to getting it done. It's no different than selling your business. What makes us so successful is we have a process in place that we follow that has stood the test of time, that we continue to improve on, but that we know that if we talk about these things and we do these things and we follow a process, we're going to be able to maximize the sale of your company when we go to market. The same way that if you do these things, you're going to be able to maximize how attractive your company is to an investor. So the next thing we're going to talk about is one of the most desirable things that a buyer or equity group looks for, and that's recurring revenue stream. Yeah, we'd all love to have a recurring revenue stream, but a lot of companies that we take to market, they don't have that. They're maybe a one and done, or they have a product that they're selling or service they provide that might not, once they do it, you might not need them for a while, but there are always ways to look at recurring revenue streams. And the HVAC industry has been excellent at this. They decided, hey, we could go in when air condition breaks and we could replace units, or we could work for a builder or new construction and put in new units. But once we do that, we're done. But what they realized over time is that if we put in, a service department and we sell service contracts, then now all of a sudden we're going in that customer's house once or twice a year, and we're able to look at them and reintroduce ourselves to them. We get to look at the unit to see if anything's wrong with it, but really, honestly, most time it's a lost leader. A lot of times the companies aren't making a ton of money on that recurring visit, but what they do make the money on is now they visit the house and they say, oh, by the way, while we were looking at your unit, we noticed that this and this and this is wrong. And now all of a sudden you're out there, you've identified an issue, and now you're quoting a job. So there, all of a sudden, your recurring revenue of that service contract is turning into more revenue, because now you're out there and you're helping and you're fixing other things that they might not have even necessarily knew what was wrong, but you're building customer loyalty. You're building the confidence in the customer because they're looking at you, and now you're performing some work that is going to make their investment in their HVAC or their roof or their plumbing, or whatever it may be. They're looking at their investment. Now it's going to last longer. And so again, how do we create a recurring revenue stream if you don't have one? You have to look in your business. Is there a way to get in front of that customer more often? Is there a way we can get a service contract? Pool companies are great at this. I saw a lot of pool builders, and they go in and they do the construction and they build a pool in someone's backyard. Well, the next thing is these pools need to be serviced every single month. So they have a whole service division. So again, I know we're talking about home services, but we sell a lot of those companies, but in any business, if there's a recurring revenue stream, that's a value driver. So if you're in a business that has that kind of model, you may look at a company that is selling for 4 to 6 times EBITDA, and now you have a strong recurring revenue stream where month after month after month, these contracts are kicking in, and you're not even billing, right? It's ACH, it's hitting your bank account because this money is coming in every single month, or you're being able to hit their credit card or their debit card. So that money is pretty much guaranteed on a month-to-month basis unless the customer fires you. That makes you extremely attractive in the marketplace. Companies like pest control companies are always in high demand with private equity groups because they know they're going in and they're buying a company that is going to a customer's house month after month after month. And we talked about it in the very beginning, what drives value, strong revenue base, customer loyalty. Well, that all plays into recurring revenue, because if you're there every single week, every single month, once a quarter, twice a year, whatever it is, you have recurring revenue, you're in front of that customer, and they're probably not going to go anywhere else. So it's a very important recurring revenue stream. If you don't have it, is there a way in your industry to create a recurring revenue stream? If there is, you should look into it. If there's not, then so be it. If you can't have recurring revenue, you can't have recurring revenue. But I would argue that recurring revenue could even be the customer that's going to happen the next time. Again, you don't know what the next time is. My business is a perfect example. If I help you exit your company today, you're retired, right? What's next? How am I going to get recurring revenue out of that? Well, I think the customer loyalty comes into that. I did such a wonderful job with helping you exit your company. One thing I do know, business owners know other business owners, or they go back to their trusted advisor that had referred me, and they say, hey, Chris did such a great job. So now all of a sudden, in a way, I'm building my recurring revenue stream, because if they know a business owner or a friend or family member that's looking to exit their company, they're going to share my name and number with them. If their trusted advisor who has a client list, if I made them look really good, now all of a sudden they go to their wealth manager, thank you so much for referring Chris. I've done a great job. They're now going to refer me. So even when you're in a business where you say it's one and done, is it really? Maybe it's not. Do a great job, and your reputation will make your revenue stream recurring. Another way to make your company more attractive in the marketplace, eliminating those bottlenecks. What does that mean? It means identifying and addressing any obstacles that hinder your growth. Sometimes that's your personnel, right? You have this rock star salesperson that brings in so much revenue, and you're like, wow, I can never afford to lose this person. But what you don't realize is they're a cancer within your company. They're causing division amongst your other salespeople. They're causing them not to be able to grow. They're causing them to have bad feelings towards your company. Look, I had this in my personal life. I had a partner in an appliance repair company with my brother, and we were young in the company. As it was growing, we had a technician that was amazing. But when we found out that the technician was poisoning the minds of the other technicians, and it was causing the atmosphere of the company from going from a company that everyone loved working for to a company that people were, you could see it, the look in their faces that they weren't as happy to show up for work every single day. And we had a partner that said, we can't afford to get rid of so-and-so. If we do, we're gonna lose a third of our business. You know, they're the best technician that we have. And my brother and I said, no, we can't afford not to get rid of them, because if we're not careful, we'll be left with just one person and they'll wind up leaving anyway. So we had to identify the fact that this was an obstacle that was hindering our growth. And what happened was a couple of things. One, we got rid of the technician. It sent a message to the rest of the technicians that anyone is expendable. And I hate to use that word, but anyone can be fired from the company at any given time. And that's not a statement to say that we're going to get rid of people and we're the boss and you're the employee. No, the message that we sent was anyone that is making the work environment less than desirable or less than a place that you're happy to come to work with every day, this isn't the place for them. So it actually increased the morale. So what happened was, now these technicians that were underperforming, now they were happy to come to work every day. They started performing at higher levels and they were happy, and they would come to us and say, we're so happy that you did that, because that was causing a problem every single day. So if you identify a problem in your company, don't be afraid to eliminate the problem or get rid of it. And some of it might be, I've had this marketing company that I've worked with forever. I don't want to get rid of them. If they're still in the age of running your ads in the Sunday newspaper and you're not doing anything online or social marketing or doing things that could attract your business, they're actually holding you down. You're not paying for up-to-date service. So that puts a noose around your neck. Some, loyal person, loyal to a fault. And I think that makes a company attractive. You want to be loyal. If you notice something that's holding you down and is causing your company a problem and it's causing you not to grow, you have to be willing to make those changes and make those adjustments. And sometimes it's services that you offer. You may have started out years ago offering a certain service, and that was what your company was known for. But industries change, and all of a sudden, those services aren't needed anymore. The industry has changed and left you behind, and you're not changing with it. You can't be so stuck in your ways that you're gonna cause yourself not to keep up with the times, and keeping up with the times is even not good enough. You need to stay ahead of what your competitors are doing. But if you're not even staying at the level that they're at, you're gonna put yourself out of business. So again, you gotta eliminate those bottlenecks, address those areas that are hindering your growth. And it's not necessarily meaning you have to get rid of those things, but you have to address them and maybe make them better, or be willing to change. What's working, what's not working, and even if it's working, how do we make it work better? And if it's not working, do we eliminate it, or can we transition into something else? So again, very important. Everyone loves to talk about what a great job they're doing, makes you feel good. Very few are willing to say, what are we not doing well? What's holding us back? What's keeping us from growing? But the really successful companies and the companies that sell for the most money in the marketplace are those that not only look at their problems, they embrace it, they meet it head on, and they look at that as a challenge to say, hey, we need to get rid of this, or we need to make this better. So identifying your weakness is really a strength. One of the most asked questions we get from business owners is, when is the right time to sell? My answer is always, that's not a question that I can answer for you. I would look at you and say, when is the right time to sell? Because you'd love to think that it's the Hallmark, movie that you watch with the happy ending, that you worked your entire life and now it's time to hand it off to the next generation. They're going to take care of it. Or it's time to sell, and then we're going to, sell off into the sunset and enjoy retirement. But life doesn't really happen like that. Most of the time when people sell a company, it's not for favorable reasons. It could be health reasons. It could be relationship troubles. partnership troubles, areas of things that you never saw coming. And now all of a sudden you're put in a position where you don't necessarily want to sell, but you have to sell. Someone asks me, when is the right time to sell? I tell them today, but that's even if you're not looking to sell for 20 years. And they say, what do you mean today? It means your business should always be in a position where if you had to hit the marketplace, you can maximize the value of the company in that marketplace. So it should always be ready to sell. How are you always ready to sell? Well, you have to start from the beginning. And I often talk to my financial planner friends, my wealth managers, and say, look, you're looking at managing people's money and you're looking at helping them go towards their retirement. But if the biggest asset, and oh, by the way, the most volatile asset, but the largest asset that they have, the asset that pays for their mortgage, their cars, their family vacations, schools, everything in life, if you have no idea what the value of that company is, how do you plan on retiring one day? How do you plan on exiting? So you need to know day one, what is your business worth? If you know what your business is worth today, and if you had to go to the market and is prepared to go to the market, you're going to drive the value. Market timing is important. I'm not going to lie to you, right? You have to sell when the market conditions are favorable, not when you're burnt out. But even if you're burnt out and you want to sell, it's still okay if you've been preparing all along to have your company go to market. But market conditions make a difference. There could be a roll-up in a certain industry, and private equity groups are spending billions of dollars in a certain industry. Well, guess what? That's only going to last so long. So you may have a very difficult decision to make, because you might be in a market and you might say, okay, private equity's knocking on my door. And you may choose today's not the right time for you to sell, but now all of a sudden they buy a couple of your competitors. Now you're forced at competing against a giant in your marketplace now, and not two or three other companies. And by the way, once they've invested in those other companies, they may not have a need to invest in yours. And one of the biggest misconceptions is selling my business. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you're out. There are very strategic ways of selling your business, but still being part of the company going forward. It's known as a recap or a recapitalization of your company, or rolling over equity, meaning that, hey, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to, in today's market, there's a lot of money private equity groups are selling. I'd be crazy not to look at it, but I'm too young to retire. So what happens is you sell 70, 80, 90% of your company. And then now you go and you're a partner in that company, and they're going to come in over the next 4 to 7 years, and they're going to do other acquisitions. They're going to build the company, but they're going to have an exit in mind. So you're going to get what they call a second bite of that apple, which means that second payday, when they go to sell again and they bought your company at, let's say, a 4 or 5 or 6 times EBITDA. They've grown it to a point where the company's worth 10 and 12 and 14 times EBITDA. That second bite of the apple you get, that second payday when they sell because you rolled equity, could be worth as much, if not more, than the majority share that you sold. So even if today is not the day you want to sell, selling doesn't mean you have to exit the business today. It means there are other ways of exiting. And sometimes when you partner, because that's what they are, you're partners, you partner with an investment firm or a private equity group, they're able to do things in your company over the next 3 to 5 years that would take you maybe 10 to 20 years to get accomplished. So, and again, you're doing it with their money. So you take the chips off the table, you're doing it with their money. So timing is everything. You have to look around and see what's going on in your industry. Proactive planning. Look, you're looking for a 7, 8, 9 figure exit. That requires strategic planning well in advance. It doesn't happen today. It doesn't happen, well, I decide to go to sell today. I've got a great company. I'm going to get all this activity in the marketplace. You very well may, but think about it. You spend a lifetime working and building an incredible company, and you have one shot at selling it. You have one shot at not only selling it, but selling it right and selling it for the maximum value. That's why it's always great to have a plan. When we talk about proactive planning, that's in talking with someone, like myself. You call CII. We have a customer today that we're under contract with, and we're 30 days from closing in the pool construction industry that my father first met over 20 years ago. 20 years ago? Yeah, that's not the norm. But what happened was they met 20 years ago. It wasn't the right time to sell, but knew one day they wanted to sell. So every year they kept in touch and updated the value, knowing that if they ever had to go to market, they'd be ready. And that happens with a lot of our clients, not 20 years, but most of our clients we met a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and they come back to us and we stay in touch. So again, putting the company in a position to be able to sell for the maximum value in the marketplace starts today, even if you're not looking to sell today. In fact, I don't want you to be looking looking to sell today. If you're looking to sell 5 or 10 years from now, it's a great time to give us a call because we have the ability to set you up to maximize the value. But if it is today and you're ready to retire, that's the same conversation we're still going to have with you anyway. We're going to look at the little things we can do immediately to make you more attractive in the marketplace. So proactive planning is extremely important. And then you want to avoid decline. Everyone always says, I want to sell when I'm on top. Think about it. The only way you truly know when you reached the extreme top is when you start going the other direction, right? It's the only way you know you maximize your revenue. The highest it's ever going to get is when you start going down the other way. Now we're talking about a whole different transaction altogether. If you start wanting to go to market or sell your company on a decline, we talked about value drivers. What drives a value? That's a value detriment. That's a value dagger in the value driver. It's going to now all of a sudden, if something in your industry is selling between 4 and 6, and you have 2-3 years in a row when your revenue is declining, you may be looking at a 3. Or someone might be willing to offer you a 4 or 6 times EBITDA multiple, but now all of a sudden, instead of the majority of it being in cash or the majority of it being a seller's note, now you're forced to take what they call an earnout. And that's basically a payment based on performance of your company that you may no longer be in charge of running every day. Someone else is, and it's reliant on how good of a job they're going to do. But because they have no confidence in your financials, we talked about this in previous videos, what drives values, and we talked about revenue drivers. How dependable is the revenue that's coming into your company? How much can they depend on that on a year-to-year basis? Well, now when you're going down year after year after year, they can't depend on that. They're not going to care what you did 5 years ago. They're going to know that the last 2-3 years, your numbers are going down, and they're going to structure their deal very differently. You know, everyone thinks about selling the business as how much money am I going to get? That's only part of the equation. It's price, and just right underneath price are going to be terms. It's great that you're going to pay me a lot of money, but how are you going to pay me? And again, when your business is thriving, you're going to get mostly cash at closing. Maybe a seller's note, a guaranteed seller's note. And there still might be an earnout involved if your company is growing. And let me explain that. That could mean that your company keeps growing exponentially year after year after year, and you want to get paid for that. So you want to get paid for the future growth of the company. So you're going to get a high multiple today, but because the company has shown over the last 5 years that you're growing at such a level that they'll incentivize you. They'll say, okay, we're going to pay you based on a value of where you're at today, and we're going to give you X amount of cash, but we're also going to give you an incentive, an earnout. If you hit certain levels, we're willing to pay you more money, and we negotiate terms like that for our clients all the time. We did it in the roofing industry with a good friend and partner of mine now, Ken Kelly. You know, his company was growing, and we were able to not only achieve through our process in the competitive marketplace 20% more than he thought he would get when he exited the company, and he did roll over equity, but we were able to get him future earnings beyond percentage of ownership, but based on an earnout. It was a short-term earnout, but he was confident that his company was going to hit the certain levels, and the buyer said, or the equity group said, look, we don't want to wait, so we want to buy you today because we know you can wait 6 months, hit those numbers, and we're going to pay you based on multiple offer off of that. If you hit those numbers or anywhere along the line, there were metrics in place that you can earn extra money. So again, avoid decline. If you're waiting till you hit the very top and then you start going down, then you want to sell, just understand, it doesn't mean your business isn't sellable. We could still sell it. It means we're going to have to get more creative in the structure of the transaction, and you're probably not going to get as high of a multiple as you would have if you were selling on the rise. So avoid decline if possible, and there are ways to exit your company with also still being part of the company, which again, if you're young, if you're under 50 years old and you're not looking to retire, that's a great strategy to have, to be involved in the company going forward. And oh, by the way, you want to talk about value drivers? Equity groups and investment groups love when the current owner of the company is willing to stay on board and roll equity, because that rolling equity is basically taking their money, their portion of the company, and investing it in the company going forward. That's telling the purchaser that I believe in this company, and it's going to continue to grow, and I believe in you, that you're with you behind what we've already established. You know, what we can achieve is limitless. So again, those are value drivers. So I know we're talking about avoiding decline, but I also want to make sure when we're avoiding decline that we're talking about the value of getting out while you're on the rise, but also still being a part of it. If I can leave you with anything, and then you could take away, it would be if you're looking for a large exit, an 8-figure exit, a 9-figure exit, you have to have a 7, 8, 9-figure mindset. And not just the mindset, you have to have a business that's worthy of that. So you have to start building a business that's not just growing, but truly worth selling. But I said it in the very beginning, what business is truly worth selling? That's one that's truly worth buying. You could think the world of your company, but if it's not set up and it's not attractive in the marketplace, a buyer is not, or an investor is not going to put their money behind it or their reputation behind it with their investors to invest in your company going forward. So if you want to aim for an 8-figure, 9-figure exit, you have to have an 8, 9-figure company. Build it today, start today. It all starts with your mindset, your leadership, and it all starts with your planning.